Hi, welcome back to my channel. In this video, what I want to do is talk about, can women be preachers? Can they be pastors? Can a woman actually stand in the pulpit and teach and run a church? But before I get into the conversation, I want to first and foremost thank everyone who subscribed to my channel. Thank everyone who gave my channel a thumbs up. And I also would like to encourage you, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. Please give this video a thumbs up as well as share it. So I want to go ahead and get into that discussion. Can women be pastors? First, we have to kind of go back to understand the nature of God and the nature of Jesus. In Malachi 3:6, for I, the Lord, do not change. And in Hebrews 13:8, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. So when you look at that, we have to understand this is like the baseline of who God is and who Jesus is. They do not change. So whatever law is in place when we read our Bibles, those are the laws that that they live by and that we currently live by now. There is no new gospel that's coming. There is no new laws that are coming. Everything is complete. That's why in the Bible you see when you get to the end of the Bible, it says do not add to or take away, because everything is already set. So with that being said, the second thing we need to look at is the relationship between the first people that God put on the earth, which was Adam and Eve. And I wanted to start with the actual fall and look at the punishment that was put in place when both Adam and Eve sinned against God. So looking at Genesis 3:16, it says, to the woman, he said, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you. So right there, God, as a punishment to Eve for disobeying him, he already established that her husband is going to be the head of her. And then when you look at Genesis 3:17, this is the punishment God is giving to Adam. And to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. So that right there is already established that as when it comes to women and men, husband and wife, the man is always the head of his wife. So even if you're in a relationship, you have a husband and the wife is making more money than the husband, she still have to be submissive to her husband. If you're a Christian, you're married, your husband is the head of you. He's the head of the household. You have to submit to him. That doesn't mean that he's better than you. That doesn't mean that you don't have any say in the marriage. It's just that that's the line and how things flow according to God. So God is the head, then come man, and then come the woman. And that is based on the punishment that was dealt out to Adam, Eve, and also the serpent was also punished. So this is something that was established in the beginning of the Bible itself. Then when you look at, and when you go to the New Testament and you look at Paul, like if you look at 1 Timothy, Paul is writing a letter to Timothy. So now we have to kind of look at who Paul is. Paul, Paul was Saul. Paul Saul, the same person. He is a Jew. He is from the tribe of Benjamin. He's a Benjamite. And so his job was he would go out and hunt down Jews, which was his own people. These are people who are no longer following the Mosaic laws. They are now following the teaching of Jesus. So he would go out, round them up, lock them up, kill them or whatever. So you know the story. He was on his way on the road to Damascus to go persecute Christians. And that's when Jesus, he had an encounter with Jesus. He turned around, Now he became a Christian. Now he became, he gave up following the Mosaic laws to now follow the laws of Christ, of Jesus. So now this is him writing a letter to Timothy. And then you have to look at who Timothy is. Timothy is not a Jew. He's not from any of the tribes. Timothy is a Gentile, but he is the head of one of the church. And so Paul is writing him a letter to let him know things are kind of getting out of hand. This is how church should be ran. Because you have to understand, as a Gentile, he didn't grow up under the Mosaic laws, and he did not grow up under the teachings of Jesus. He converted from Gentile to a Christian, but he's used to how the Gentile ran things. During that time, they did have women that was, preachers as far as the Gentiles. They may have ran churches. They may have been over their husband. They may have been in position where they was teaching men. They had authority over men. So now Paul is writing Timothy a letter, and this is 1 Timothy 2:12 through 15. I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet, for Adam was formed first, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. Yet she will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith and love and holiness with self-control. So Paul is not saying, for instance, that he himself is that he's putting forth this law that women shouldn't teach. He's saying to a Gentile that he do not permit women to teach or have authority over men. And then he goes back to why, when he goes and mention Adam and Eve, he goes back to why this is not permitted, because of the sin that happened between Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. So he's still referring back to the punishment that was given to women for betraying the law. And like he said, she became a transgressor. And when you look at the definition of a transgressor, it's a person who chooses to intentionally disobey, because she was told not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, but she went ahead and did it anyway, even though she knew that was a sin against God. So she chose to disobey, she chose to rebel, and she chose to commit sin. And so that's why women, because of that, is part of the punishment, that they cannot have authority over men. And if you always think about how in the Bible, when they talk about church, they always say Jesus is the head of the church. Jesus is the groom and the church is the bride. It still correlates with the marriage of man and woman. It still have that with God, Jesus being the head of the church, and the church, the people, the individuals are being the body. So with Jesus being the head, that means the man come next and then the woman. So in the church, in the pulpit, in that establishment, the laws has already been set in the beginning of the Bible that a woman cannot have authority over a man because of what Eve did. So therefore, a woman cannot be standing in front of a man in a congregation teaching. She cannot be a head of the church. She cannot be the next, because Jesus is the head. So she can't even fall second and be next in line, because it's the man, and she cannot have authority over a man. So therefore, a woman cannot preach. And I know a lot of times, I hear people saying, well, what about this woman in the Bible? And what about that woman? So I'm going to give an example of Phoebe. And this is Romans 16:1. And it says, I commend to you our sister Phoebe, a servant of the church at Caesarea, that you may welcome her in the Lord in a way worthy of the saints, and help her in whatever she may need from you, for she has been a patron of many and of myself as well. So some people use this to say, see, she was, going out with the disciples. She was in the church and she was doing things in the church. What did God make Eve? She was a helper, a helpmate to Adam. So with Phoebe or any woman in the church, do we have a part in the church? Yes, but it's going to be a part of a helper. Whether it's a deacon, that's going to be a servant, someone that's helping. But they're not going to be in front of a congregation teaching where there is men. So a woman can be there to serve in other capacities that helps the church. Just like in those days when they would meet in the house, the women would cook and serve food to them or whatever else they may need, because you got to understand the disciples are traveling. They're going out, they're spreading the good news, so they're going from different places and they might need somewhere to stay. And so therefore a woman can say, hey, you can, come and stay here because you are a man of God. Or a woman can, they can do whatever they can if it's financing, if they need money or whatever, because Phoebe, from my understanding of the Bible, she was kind of wealthy, and so she helped. And if you look at Jesus, there was women that helped him throughout his travels and his ministry. So a woman do have a place, but it's going to always be in the place of serving, a place of helping the ministry, helping the kingdom grow, but not in the capacity that a lot of women want to be in, which is being the head of a congregation, which is being a pastor, a preacher, or something like that. Like I said, that's not man saying that. That's not me saying that. That is what God said. In the beginning, as part of the punishment, God has already established that women are not to be ahead, not to be over men. That men are to, the husband is over his wife, and when it comes to the church, is God first, and then it's man, and a woman is not going to be in a position to teach men because of that punishment. So there's nothing to get around that as far as, well, this woman was a prophet. A prophet is not a leader. A prophet is a messenger. A prophet is someone who God tells something and he said, hey, go tell this person. It's one thing to be a messenger for God, but it's another thing to be a head, to be a leader, to be a spiritual leader, because God already said he do not want women leading men, because what Eve did, her first time taking a leadership position, she chose to rebel instead of obey. So that's why God do not want women in that leadership position when it comes to the kingdom, when it comes to the church. That's why he does not want them in that leadership position. And then when you kind of look at what happened with the conversation, when you look at Genesis 2:16 through 17, this is God having a conversation. And it says, and the Lord commanded the man, saying, you may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die. But then look at Genesis 3:2 through 3. And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. She added that on. God did not say that. If you compare those two, God said, do not eat of the tree of good, of the knowledge of good and evil. She's saying that God said you shouldn't eat from the tree and you shouldn't touch it. So she's adding on things that God did not even say. So it's like, that's why I said that women have to learn when to be quiet and learn when to follow authority and be more obedient instead of just doing what they want to do. Because in here they're saying that she just willingly disobeyed an order that was given, really a commandment that was given by God. She willingly disobeyed that. And so every time a woman argues the fact that she can be a preacher, she can be a head of a church, she's actually arguing or disobeying or going against God. That is something that she would need to take up with God, because like I said, if you look at the Bible, God has already established that a woman cannot be ahead of a man. that he doesn't want that, and that's part of the punishment that was put on Eve, that she has to be in a submissive position and she's a helper of her husband, and that she's not a leader. So you may be thinking, okay, if I have a company, if I run a company, I'm going to have men that I'm over. That's a company. That's a one-time, that's just a one-time transaction. Y'all are doing business together. Doing business with a man is not being his leader. It's not being his spiritual leader. You're not over him. You're not dictating to him how to run his life. You're just doing a transaction with him as far as business. With the church, that's leadership. You're being a spiritual guide for a man. You're in leadership over this man. You're the one, he's a sheep and you're leading him. And so that's what God do not want. He put men in leadership position when it comes to the church, when it comes to the body of the church, and they are shepherds and they're leading their flocks to make sure they stay on the right road, to make sure they're getting the education they need, to make sure they're being able to go out into the world, to make sure the men are doing what they're supposed to do in their household when it comes to their wives and their children. Make sure they're obedient. Make sure they have self-control. Make sure they're conducting business right. It's a lot of things that go on in that as far as the teaching of the Bible, that the leadership of the man is supposed to give out in the church to make sure that everybody stays on the right path. And so that is different than if a woman has a business and she's hiring men, or she has a business and she conducts business with men. That is something totally different. Like I said, just like with a prophet is someone who's going out giving a message. Like some people wanted to say that with Mary, when Jesus had risen and he was no longer in the tomb, and Jesus told her to go tell the disciples that he has risen. Some people take that as, oh, she was the first one to preach. No, Jesus said to her, tell my brethren, tell tell the disciples. So he's giving her a message to carry. That's not leadership. That's not spreading the gospel. We're not supposed to add to the Bible or take away from the Bible. He's giving her a message to take to the disciples. So a messenger is, like I said, a messenger is not a leader. And we're speaking about in household and in the kingdom when it comes to the body of Christ, which is the church, which Jesus is the head of. So we have to follow, when you're reading your Bible, that's why you have to read the Old Testament as well as the New Testament to get an understanding. Like I said, it's very important to understand the nature of God. If this is what God punished Eve with, you cannot be a leader. It's not going to change because now we have the New Testament, because God and Jesus don't change. And it's in the Bible that they do not change. So this is a law, this is a punishment that was established that is not changing.